um, after the recording or after the webinar today. It will also be live on our event webpage on edfi.org. So with that, I'll let Sean jump right into it.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. So if we haven't met before, my name is Sean, and I support the local education agencies, the collaboratives, the educational service agencies in utilizing interoperable data to solve problems for their learners. And a lot of times these are either school district or charter school system or school level problems, or even classroom and student level solutions that we're trying to help our folks in the community utilize data to really meet the needs of their learners. And at EdFi, our mission is, it's simple to say, it's not simple to do, but it is to make that work of interoperable data or interconnected data faster, and to make it easier to do, and to make it more flexible and adaptable, which after the year we've all had together in the pandemic and supporting remote learning and all of the changes that school systems have grappled with this year, it's never been more important to get data and to get insights from that data out of all of these technology systems that you utilize. Especially think about the great increase in those systems by remote learners for sure. But basically to be able to get the most value out of this data by having it be real time and have it be connected and shared among your systems that you utilize, so it's not siloed and it's not pocketed and it's not sitting in a place where it's difficult to get. So in this session, what we're going to focus on is trying to talk together about a specific problem. A lot of times these interoperability projects, what we've learned from the field is they're most successful when they really pinpoint and target a specific problem, or you may hear the term use case sometimes. And what that means is you could do a lot of things with interoperable data, but in order to deliver something successfully, something discrete and specific, and that you can do relatively quickly to put it into the hands of your end users to actually make a difference for them, we want you to help do that as rapidly as possible. And so pinpointing a problem and then how we can tackle it with data. And sometimes it's not all the data, right? It's not all the systems you could possibly integrate. It may just be a set of data, a domain of data, and maybe even from one system, or it could be from a couple of systems. We're going to focus on a use case today, chronic absenteeism, that is typically taking data from one source system, your student information system, but utilizing that attendance and absence related data in a way such that you can really equip end users to make use of it very quickly, to know about this problem well ahead of time before it gets to be a big challenge. And that is on chronic absenteeism. And to do that, we're going to utilize something that the EdFi community calls a starter kit. And what we have done is we've harvested learnings and successful field implementation artifacts from other folks in the community who have solved this problem and packaged those things up into a very straightforward set of steps that you can follow in order to realize the benefits of this solution in your environment too. But to start with, let's focus on the problem itself. What is chronic absenteeism and why is it a problem? So any of you who work in school systems today, or if you're a parent of a child who's in a school system, you understand that absences have different kinds of effects and consequences. They have near-term consequences, such as my student's falling behind because he or she missed X number of classes and there's just an amount of work to make up. It may be challenging to learn on your own when you're not on pace with where the educator is and the rest of the classroom is. But importantly, these effects snowball and they turn into really serious long-term consequences. And when we talk about chronic absences or chronic absenteeism, what we mean is getting to that threshold and past it where a student is missing more than 10% of the instructional time in a school year. Sometimes different states will have specific definitions, or your district may have a policy that has a slightly different definition, like more than 15 days of school per year missed or something like that. But in general, if we think about districts at large across the country, we're all in school for roughly 180 days in a school year. That's usually about the length of a school year. And missing 10% of the instructional days is something like 18 days worth of school. That could be, if you're a middle or high school student and you've got period attendance, that could be missing your Algebra 1 class that many times, right? 10 or 12 or 15 or 18 times over the course of a year, or it could be missing entire days. But the things that are pretty staggering when you look at the data, and this is data that was pulled by NCES, it's actually US-wide Department of Ed sourced data in a study that they did on chronic absenteeism a couple years back, shows that it's a gigantic problem. 1 out of every 6 students on average is actually chronically absent or at that threshold or worse of missing that much instructional time in a school year. That equates to something like over 7 million students that are hitting and crossing that threshold of missing their learning time in the classroom. And what happens is when you start to see that many kids missing that much instructional time and just that many opportunities to learn with the guidance of the educator and with the support of peers in a classroom, is that things like dropout likelihoods really drastically increase. That study found that 7 times more likely, a student may be 7 times more likely to drop out if they've experienced a year of chronic absenteeism at any point in between 8th grade and 12th grade, which is staggering. We also see that in primary grades that 10% or more of students in kindergarten and first grade are chronically absent. And what that may mean for them is that may put them in jeopardy of not being able to hit milestones that really matter for their career as a student and beyond, like reading at grade level by 3rd grade. And then the likelihood of dropouts increasing, which eventually turns into economic challenges and community-wide challenges because those students aren't graduating career and college or military ready. They're not very well prepared for jobs and livelihoods after that point. And so there are many, many systemic ripple effects that come about from this chronic absenteeism challenge. And that's one of the reasons why agencies across the EdFi community have sought to tackle this problem and then share what they've learned, and why we've packaged it up to make it available for you to use. So the next thing I want to ask you to do is a little empathy exercise. I want you to, this is the form of a user story. As a fill in the blank role, I need to do something so that I can accomplish something. That's the basic form of what we call a user story in software development terms. And I want you to think a little bit about putting yourself into the shoes of these different roles. Like as a principal, I need to know what's happening with my learners and their ability to be present, to gain their access to educators, to guide their learning, to have classroom experiences, so that I, as a building leader, can leverage programs and resources to intervene and support students who may be having challenges in their home or challenges medically or lots of other reasons why they may be absent from school. But before it gets to be a problem, right? There are lots of ways that principals can intervene and support and pull in programmatic resources if they know that that pattern is happening. Same as from the educator perspective. If I have 25 or 30 students in my classroom, I want to know as early as possible if that trend of a student missing instructional time is starting to have some bearing on their mastery of the academics that we're trying to cover in the class that I teach that student in. I don't want to have some sort of a behavioral pattern that is making it for an academic consequence for my learners, right? That's typically the kind of thing that an educator would want this data to be able to answer for them. And then from the perspective of a counselor or a registrar, I want to be able to understand things like the number of absences. Are they impacting a student's ability to gain credit for a course that they've been enrolled in? Whether those attendance requirements are being met for graduation, right? There's a lot of policy related things that would matter, and sort of the graduation plan requirements that we want to make sure all of our students are on track to graduate. And then from a parent perspective, if I don't know that there's a problem brewing, if I'm just, it's not on my radar very much, then it's difficult for me to reinforce or influence or support changing that pattern from the home part of the school-home relationship. But for all of these different roles, they all have a reason to know the insights and to need the insights from this data before it gets to be a problem, not after the problem has already occurred. That's really one of the bottom lines here with this problem. And so the solution that many of our LEAs out in the field have come up with is utilizing real-time attendance data, usually from their student information system. Sometimes it's from an attendance package, but it's typically from a student information system, in order to put that data and the synthesis of it into these end users' hands as quickly as possible. And they've used, these are field tested approaches. These have all been part of successful projects. And what we have done is we have assembled these artifacts from those projects, as well as the learnings, what went well and what was adjusted after they rolled it out, and learned some things about what would make it even more useful. And we basically package those things up into a sample app with sample data to put into your hands very, very quickly. I'm going to show this to you in just a moment. That allows you to go share this concept and this vision and this clickable prototype with other folks who may care about it. That could be a campus level administrator, a principal or an assistant principal. It could be members of your cabinet and the leadership from your district. But the idea is we've made a way for you to have this very happy path kind of installation of a sample app that is clickable, that you can put into your leaders' hands in order to help them see what this could look like and how it could help them support their own learners. So let me jump over to actually show it to you. I'm bringing up right now from the EdFi website, which is www.ed-fi.org. This how to use EdFi menu is where we're going to start. And under the school districts part of this menu, we've got a link for address chronic absenteeism. This is where we list our starter kits that we've published for various folks in our community to make use of. And so we wrote this, all of this content and this sample application and this starter kit, we wrote it all around the vision of supporting both technology leaders, people who usually tend to the systems in a school district, the applications and such, but also for instructional leaders, or the people who are in charge of programs, or who may be very data savvy, but they're the ones who are focused on things like attendance and absences or academics and achievement. And so this content is meant to support both sets of groups, technology leadership and instructional leadership, so that you can work together and really deliver something that's transformative for your learners. And so what you'll see when you go to this, and this is public and open to anyone who wants to use it, is we've first got a little context about the consequences that come about from chronic absenteeism, why this is a priority, why it matters, why this is a good place to start actually for an interoperability project in a school district. We've got things that are statistically important and significant called out. We covered those a little bit earlier in this webinar, but those are there for your other leaders that you may want to share this with so that they understand the scope and the scale of the problem. We've got some words direct from some of the agencies and leaders out there in the field who have implemented this and what this has meant for them. This is Dr. Staley from Chico Unified Schools out in California. She's the superintendent of schools there, one of the heavy contributors to the starter kit. And then we have a number of common questions that we tried to anticipate and answer, or at least surface as considerations for you that we assume will be some of the things that you'll want to know going into this. And they cover things like, how much will this cost? How much time will this starter kit and this initiative take? What kinds of district systems, technology systems, and applications are involved? Which roles in my district should be involved? Who are the subject matter experts or the administrators, the key administrators that I need to bring in, the folks that'll be power users of this system? And then what kind of technology environment will I need? Can I utilize what I've already invested in, things in my own data center, or can I use my my cloud tenancy in case that's where I put my applications? And so those are some of the basic questions we've tried to tee up for you. And then we have given you the summary. It's like the table of contents essentially for what is entailed in building out this kit. And if you are a district that tends to take on a lot of technology initiatives in-house, what we call do-it-yourself approach, then what you see here is this kind of slider bar approach that just gives you an overview of what you're taking on. So you start by installing this very straightforward sample application with sample data that I mentioned earlier. You've got some initial configuration steps just to make that available to your end user. And then you've got the actual data visualizations, and I'll show those to you in just a moment. That's the first step, is making that clickable prototype, the sample app that you can put into people's hands and get them to understand what's possible, the pathway you can follow. Then part two, which starts with step 4 here, is we help you make it your own. It turns out this sample app and sample data is really a template for you to follow, where we walk you through the configurations to turn this into your own test environment application that connects your own data from your own system, so that you get to the point where you've installed your local version of this in your environment, you've loaded your own student data into it, run through the configuration steps there, and then essentially plan for rolling it out to your end users. So that's the overview of this. This bottom link right here is, if this is of interest to you, all you do is click this and you will be prompted to create a community account, and you'll gain access to the tools. I'm going to show you what they actually look like in just a moment. Now, let's say you're not so much a do-it-yourselfer oriented district, or your bandwidth is just all tied up, right? Because we're all still working in a very challenging school year, I know, and you want to rely on a partner to do this just because your IT staff is really consumed with the things that are already on their plate. There are a number of vendor options that are available to you to solve this chronic absenteeism problem and make use of these starter kit resources as well. And we've got a number of different types of vendors called out here. Folks like system integrators. We have different kinds of providers of, think of it like data as a service, or even EdFi or interoperability as a service type providers that actually have a SaaS solution, allows you to get this kind of environment up and running very quickly and be able to leverage it and have support. And then I mentioned the cloud environment just a moment ago. There are a number of deployment options available to you in Azure, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and in the Google Cloud Platform. There are templatized ways to go deploy the environment that you need that have greatly sped up the deployment processes and reduced the complexity quite a bit as well. And so just know you have a lot of options there if you choose to rely on a vendor-based approach. And then the very last thing is, if you or someone on your team is looking at this and is interested, but you really need somebody else in your district to look at it, like maybe let's say you're from the research and evaluation department in your district, and you really want your CIO or your CTO to take a look at it, you can hit this button here for option number 3, which is essentially share this with them so that you can have them take a look at it, and then you can huddle and come up with a game plan for what works for your district. So this is the introduction to the problem, the solution, what's involved, and all of that. Let's role play a little bit here, that you are interested in doing this yourself. You want to kick the tires and you want to test drive it. You've got a little bit of capacity in-house to take this on. When you click this Get the Starter Kit approach, and it triggers information that'll be emailed out to you that gives you kind of just-in-time information to get started, what it'll do is route you to this wiki, which we call Tech Docs. It's essentially just a great big wiki that we host in Confluence. And the starter kit space is where you'll see this growing library of different kinds of starter kits we've made available here. Chronic absenteeism is in the upper left. There's a streamlining state reporting one, program diversity and persistence, easily pulling roster data. There's a number of things in there. We're going to stick with the chronic absenteeism because that's what we've been talking about on this call. And all I want to show you here is this is actually the starter kit steps. And so you and your technology folks, so remember we talked about doing this together, your instructional leaders and your technology leaders. This is written for both of you. And as you go through this, you essentially have 2 parts. This quick start guide is a 3-step process that you go through with some kind of like scripted deployments that we've made to make it as easy and fast as possible. We think that you can do this in about 45 minutes or an hour, this first part. And you'll end up with a sample application with sample data as you go through these steps. Let me just go down the page a little bit. You'll have a little bit of configuration to do. And then you'll have this clickable prototype that actually shows you different kinds of dashboard visualizations, different kinds of reports. These are Tableau reports, and there's a free reader license that comes along with this. So it's no cost, and it gives you the ability to access and use all of these reports right out of the box. But what you see is with these reports, there's also a user story that goes along with them. I tried to provide those to you so that it gives you a little bit of help in framing this for the various people that you want to share it with in your district. So like for this one, as a user in a district attendance personnel role, so like a district administrator who's focused on attendance, or maybe a lead registrar, I want to view year-to-year attendance across a district and across my schools and grade levels so that I can compare attendance rates within and across these schools. That's the user story for that first report, or at least one that you're welcome to use.
Can I ask you real quick
Sure.
before you go on? So for that Tableau report that you were just referencing,
Mhm.
how are school districts getting that information today? Where would that information, how does that information currently look to a school district? Is it through their SIS? Is it through some other tool? How is this uniquely different and allowing a school district to do something that they weren't previously able to do?
Sure. That's a really good question, Caroline. So I'll speak in generalities because different places will do things differently. But in general, you'll have power users of your student information system that are able to make and utilize attendance reports. And that's typically how this has been done over the years, right? And for that person, that's great. I mean, that attendance person for the campus or for the district has access to do a lot of the reporting that they need, but it may give you the ability to share what a parent needs to know, or what a classroom educator needs to know, or what a counselor needs to know, or a specialist who actually works across campuses, like a intervention specialist who works across campuses, may not have that same level of access that a power user does to those canned reports in a student information system. So what's different here is that we're unlocking that data from those kind of canned off the shelf reports and putting it into your environment under your control so that you can surface it to any of those different user roles in the way that they need it and just the parts that they need to be able to answer the questions that they need to about their students. I'd say flexibility is probably one of the key terms that's for how this is different than just using what's baked into a source system off the shelf.
Got it. Thank you. That was helpful.
Sure,
Hopefully also helpful to our listeners.
you bet. The other thing that's interesting, and I won't go into the weeds, I'm looking through every single one of these screens. I just wanted to show it to you so you can get a good sense of what exactly it is and how exactly this has helped in other environments. This screen that I'm looking at right here shows you a number of things. It's showing you these attendance rates across different schools, but it's also showing you the green and the blue up here, the columns and the rows. Those are all filters that you can add and change for various things. So what I could do, let's say I'm a principal of a good sized high school that's got a lot of different types of student backgrounds that we support. I could pull in different dimensions that you see on the left here, like ethnicity or different dimensions like that in order to make sure that we don't have an equity challenge that's brewing in our absence and attendance data, just as one example, right? It's all about knowing, are any of my kids falling through the cracks? And are there any patterns that are emerging that I can know about as soon as possible? And so if I want to slice and dice this data and add in these other filters, these are just drag and drop filters that I can pull in so that I can see, is something really different at one campus than at the others? Or is a pattern happening in a consistent way across multiple campuses that I really want to drill into further and understand by being able to pinpoint other kinds of data elements like what you see on the left-hand side here. And it's just as simple as dragging and dropping. And then that view updates and changes because it's real time and because now it's under your control and not just a canned report in a system. So that's what you get right out of the box, is this sample application and sample data. Part two essentially just continues this process of now helping you unpack that and make it your own, configure it with your own data, configure it for your own users in your own environment, and then get ready to, it essentially gives you the considerations and the recommendations to plan your rollout strategy, to put it into your end users' hands. That's what this starter kit does. That's what it's focused on and what it's meant to do. And so the last thing I'm going to share with you is the way for you to get started with this could not be simpler. If you go to the EdFi website, I was just showing it to you a couple of minutes ago. If you can either follow this link, we'll have these slides PDF'd and available to you right after the recording is done. Or you can just go to the upper right-hand corner of our website and you'll see the community account button that does the same thing. It just allows you to create a free EdFi community account, which it basically provides you access and lets you gain entry into any of these tools that we just showed today. It's straightforward, we think. We've done a number of field testing opportunities with various folks out in the field. But if you have any trouble, you've got my contact information there. You can feel free to drop me a note, and me or somebody on the LEA team or on the EdFi team will be happy to help you with anything that is just confusing or needs clarification or anything that you get stuck on or need a hand with. That's what we're here to help with. So with that, I will end here, but I will really encourage you to think about this as a very defined approach, something you can do. We know your plates are full with everything else that you've got going on this year. That's why we've been taking this super precise and specific approach towards solving a specific problem that you can do with the least amount of effort and really put something powerful into your end user's hand. And so I hope you use it, and I hope you're successful with it, and we're here to help make sure that you are. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sean. That was really great. We did not receive any questions in the chat or the Q&A. However, if folks do have a question, as you mentioned, your email is there, and you can always reach out to EdFi on our website. We have a whole Meet the Team link, so you can see everyone on the team and reach out to anyone at any time. I will ask one question for the good of the order. What's next? I saw on the TechDoc site that you referenced, there was a bunch of other starter kits. What's next for the LEA team, for school districts and collaboratives team? Are you guys releasing any new starter kits? Are you going to tackle any additional problems going forward?
Yes, we sure are. So the EdFi team overall is quite busy with a dozen different priority use case starter kits that are all basically all going through the development and release process. The LEA team has a half a dozen that we're focused on for 2021. So this is the first one, is chronic absenteeism. The next one is family engagement, which is a way to reduce complexity for parents and guardians. Remember that homeschool connection we talked about earlier in this webinar? This is equipping them with a lot of the early warning system type data and just insights from the connected data that we can support through the EdFi data standard to be able to simplify that experience for parents and guardians and have them know what they need to know to help support students from home. We also are focused on student equity, college, career, military readiness, assessment data use. We've got a really compelling assessment data starter kit that's coming out And that's extremely important because of the loss of summative data that we've had in the field over the last year with the pandemic. The use of local data is that much more important. And then LMS, learning management system, remote learner type systems, unlocking that kind of participation and attendance data for remote learners to be able to support them as we have all of these instructional modalities that we're supporting in the field today, right? Synchronous and asynchronous learners, in person and remote. This is another really important tool in the toolbox to help you with that. So that's the roadmap of LEA starter kits or local education agency starter kits that are in development right now.
Great. Thank you for that summary. I think that's going to be really compelling, especially the family engagement one. I personally struggle with that with my 7th grader at home. I look at those attendance charts that the district sends me, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, is my kid dialing in or not? That's all I need to know. So I'm excited about that one. All right, well, we will wrap it up there. Thank you all for joining. Again, the recording will be available on our website as well as the deck. So stay tuned for our next webinar. Thank you. This concludes the session today.
Thanks all.